welcome. This is Gia Banner with the PHL Standard Uncut Crew podcast. We are here today with CJ Consuela Jordan, former assistant to the Secretary of Commerce, former CEO of Jordan Management Group, which is a firm focused on politics and business. She recently served as Deputy Political Director for the RNC with responsibility for minority business participation. And she also devotes her time to minority recruiting for the United States Military Academy at West Point, among other academies, and is the co-founder of I Am Not a Hero Foundation Incorporated as well. CJ, thank you so much for joining us today. I know we had some scheduling issues there, but here we are, and it's lovely to have you on. How are you doing?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Of course, of course. Well, hey, we recently had the opportunity to speak with Paris Denard. I know you friends with him, know him well, and we were able to speak on the topic of Women's History Month. So I would love to continue that discussion with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. All right. So first, I just want to start off by saying that, you've clearly accomplished some great work over the years. I'm definitely very impressed in all of what you've been able to do. And, in today's changing political climate, we're seeing an increase in African-American women running for office and getting involved in politics overall. Historically, we've seen more people of color on the Democratic side of the aisle, but in today's climate, we are seeing a push for diversity in the Republican Party as well. So CJ, you're credited as being the first major African-American consultant to the RNC, where you advised Chairman Reince Priebus, who went on to serve as the chief of staff to former President Trump. So can you describe what impact you aim to have when you initially chose to move forward with that role?
Well, I think, that role has moved me forward quite a bit. From serving in that role, I've just recently served as the campaign manager to the lieutenant governor here in Virginia when she won Winsome Sears. And so having that opportunity from when you go to in 2015 to say, hey, I've been to campaign management school. I have a piece of paper that says that I can run and manage a campaign. It's about prayer and it's about, opening the doors because you knew it wasn't going to be easy. It's never easy for the first, second, and sometimes even the fifth to go across the door because of the time spans and the gaps that can be there. But I was fully prepared, served as a volunteer for a long time. And what I got was what we called back in the day, our street cred, licking envelopes, stuffing envelopes, going door to door. And, always been, man, I am tired. When's somebody going to pay me? But then you realize that, what? Yeah, it's about being paid. But if you hadn't volunteered to be noticed, then you wouldn't have had the opportunities. Because sometimes when you look at our forefathers and mothers, they didn't get paid for the things that they did, but they worked hard so that they could be recognized and move the country forward. And sometimes it takes that ability to do so that, you might have to volunteer in order to get the seat at the table so that you can open the door for others to move forward and come through that door.
Right. No, it's impressive. It's always about, being able to trailblaze and, props to you for being willing to be that first, So, just to piggyback off that, in today's political climate, with an increase in African-American women aiming to get into politics on both sides of the aisle, what potential obstacles do you see African-American women facing as they aim for similar roles in today's Republican Party?
Well, I think here's the thing. We all have to move, because I think it's in both political parties. We have to move beyond the crab in a barrel mentality. We also have to believe in sisterhood and brotherhood. And because it's so few of us on the Republican side, we're spending more time defending who we are as Black Republicans. And that piece comes from when we have our friends on the Democrat side that want to tear us apart, call us names, and the fact that we do have a monolithic piece in the Republican Party, because all Black Republicans are not monolithic. The Black community is not monolithic. And to denigrate us because we have diversity of thought, which is supposed to be part of a diverse group of things that we talk about, but somehow or another on the left, when we get to diversity of thought, we are pushed to the side. And so we have to embrace the fact that even when you go back to the talented 10th, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, there was a difference of opinion because there was diversity of thought. There was diversity of thought amongst Frederick Douglass. And so when we look at those individuals who paved the way for all of us to benefit down the road, don't, the one thing I said in the 2008 campaign, when I was on John McCain's campaign running the African American engagement piece, I said, I would not denigrate the Black woman who was running the campaign for the Green Party candidate. And what we loved about that time frame is we all remember when the guy was running, he said the rent is too damn high. And yes, today the rent is too damn high, right? But I didn't want to denigrate her because even though my views disagreed with hers, I did not want to, call her crazy or names and things like that, because at the end of the day, she got 5% of the vote for her candidate. And so obviously there's a constituency there for that diversity of thought. And if for some reason that if they had kept that block together and moving forward, she still would have had a voice as a thought leader in the Black community to be able to say, hey, I like what he's saying when he's saying the rent is too damn high. We need to figure out, what is he really talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Because now when we look at inflation and we look at the housing market, the rent is too damn high because it's outpacing a whole lot of people, and a lot of people are moving because they can't afford their rents because of inflation. It's trickling down. So what does that statement mean that was said in 2008? What does it mean now in 2020, now that we're going into 2023? Because, it's important. We should not just move them out just because we disagree with diversity of thought. We shouldn't chase people down like they did Colonel Allen West on the campus the other day because of diversity of thought. It is who we are as Americans to be able to embrace each and every corner and segment of who we are as Black Americans and first generation Caribbeans and Africans as this mosaic of a multicultural fabric.
Mm-hmm. And I really love, that phrase that you use, when there is a diversity of thought, there is going to be a difference of opinion. And that's part of who we are.
Yes.
So I really appreciate you for that. So let's, stay on the topic of women, of course, but switch gears a little bit into more business topics. Okay. So women in business, as you know, African-American women, they're the fastest growing demographic right now in the world of entrepreneurs. So what do you believe is a driving factor and a motivator contributing to this increase?
Well, I think one, we've always been entrepreneurs. I mean, even when you think about going back to when we were enslaved people and becoming free people, we always believe in ingenuity. So most people laugh, but if you go back and look at roots and when the field hands would come in and they would go in and urinate in the bucket, well, they were putting berries in there, and because of the urine, we came up with indigo blue. And when we think about, the beautiful dishes and foods that we eat today as tradition, okay, yeah, that's ingenuity because of the simple fact that, hey, where some people were eating ham, well, now today chitlins are a delicacy, right? Mm-hmm. So, we made soaps back then. We were seamstress back then. And then as our community progressed and we became freedmen, we opened banks and we did great things. We were carpenters, doctors, and lawyers. There are things that we're doing today. But now the question becomes, how do we do those things on a magnitude where we have that sisterhood? It shouldn't be that, okay, well, yeah, CJ's a Republican and she's, might have been in this particular administration or that administration, but we don't want to talk to her because she has diversity of thought. But I might have some knowledge base that you can use. Business should never be in the Black community about who we are as a party affiliation. Is there politics in business? Yes, it is. But coming together to bring opportunity to our community never should be about, I can't work with you. And so when we look at opportunity investment zones, which Senator Tim Scott is continuing to speak about and bring forward, or when we talk about charter schools, I mean, even though we might disagree on charter schools, but at the end of the day, when we talk about educational opportunities, because it is a business format, why shouldn't we, as Black Americans, be in business of opening charter schools, or our faith-based leaders, when we talk about parochial schools, why shouldn't we be opening some of those schools if there is dollars being put there to educate our children? Now, we might say, hey, it might be smaller classroom size, but we should be there. Anytime that there's commerce, and there's reasons I went to commerce, because when we are sleeping, guess what? Business is still being done. And when there's business being done, there should never be an opportunity where we as Black Americans should not be sitting at the table to say, how can I get a piece of that? Mm-hmm. What do I need to do? Who do I need to call? Because back in the day, we didn't deal with about political affiliation when we came down to doing business with each other. It was for the good of the community. And we got to get back to what is in the good of the community.
Well put, well put. So I mean, to kind of intersect then, right? What effect do you believe this increase in African-American female entrepreneurship is going to have on the political climate moving forward? And as it pertains to that support for Democratic and Republican fiscal policies, to kind of intersect those ideas for you?
I think when we look at that female entrepreneurship piece, and particularly Black women, mm-hmm. I think we need to segue into where are we prohibited, right? Mm-hmm. We still have, I mean, make no mistake about it, there are still glass ceilings out there. Mm-hmm. And when we think about NASA, yes, we have the hidden figures, but the question is, how many Black women who are those human computers, right, that are running those systems, how many are doing business with Elon Musk? Because at the end of the day, I like him, but let's look at the fact that the government is still seeding him money to be that leader in space. Same thing with Blue Origin and others. So how many Black-owned, rocket scientists is he doing business with? How many Black-owned anything is he doing business with, right? So we need to be very strategic about what it is that we're doing. Yes, it's great for us to have appointments. That's one thing. But if those appointments doesn't transcend to business opportunities, what good is it that you have that seat? And we, in order for us as Black women, when we are electing other Black women to run for office, we got to be able to not just hold white people accountable, we must hold our own accountable, because this is not social services. This is about business. This is all about the Benjamins. Mm-hmm. And if we're not getting the Benjamins, then we need to rethink, who are we putting in elective office? Because that is the true conversation. We're the only group that doesn't hold our elected officials who look like us accountable. We'd be like, oh, well, oh, hell no, we don't know. We want to know why we don't know. That's the reason we elected you, so that you can come and tell us we don't know. It's nice that you give out, say, well, I bought $50,000. Well, no, wait a minute. When I'm looking over here and Mary Jane is getting $1 million or $250,000 or $200 million, and we still asking for $100,000. It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I definitely agree with you there. I agree with you there.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yes. So let's stay on the topic of funding, right? But let's talk about funding in another aspect, right? Talk about those benefits. So I see the GOP, right? They're increasing their focus on HBCUs. The bill introduced by Tim Scott, as well as former President Trump's funding. What's going on with this increase in focus on HBCUs?
Well, it's not necessarily an increase. It's about the realization that Republicans were the primary individuals who founded and helped found our historical Black colleges and universities. And it's about us understanding our history, our DNA. I mean, it's complicated. It's like any other family member. You'd be like, oh Lord, who coming to dinner today? And then when they show up, you're like, they remind you, girl, don't you know, I am on salary. You can't put me out because I'm gonna still show up. So now it's the fact that we have individuals that are showing up and say, wait a minute, here, hey, we've been here over 150 years, you got us going, but somehow or another you lost your way. And so we're now rediscovering the sexiness of the things that we used to do. And that is about who we are, and it's in our DNA. Who better to stand up and make sure they are fully funded? Because at the end of the day, I share with you a story about a good friend of mine, a good advisor, Ken Blackwell. When Ken Blackwell became treasurer of the state of Ohio, he did a blue ribbon commission. It was a bipartisan commission made up of Black, white, and everybody to decide, okay, what's going on in the treasurer's office? And this was back during the Clinton days. And I remember Mary Ellen Withrow became the treasurer under Clinton. And history tells us that Black Americans in Ohio was so excited, even during the NAACP, they were like, oh, we have 13% of Black folks working in the treasurer's office. There's 13% of Black folks living in Ohio. And everybody was like, woo, right? We were all clapping. But when that blue ribbon report came out, it showed, guess what? Of that 13%, they were all tellers, nobody in management. We were doing less than 1% of business with Black owned businesses and women owned businesses. And when Ken came into office, he said, that's unacceptable. So the C-suite changed. And when it changed, it began to look like Ohio. His general counsel was Black. His chief investment advisor became Black, and she was a female. But then it forced, what he did was when people came to sit and talk about, oh, well, we like to have your money and manage your money. Guess what? It wasn't just the all white men coming in the blue suits, right? It was, where are your women? Where are your people of color? How much business are you doing with people, with minority and women owned business and veteran owned business? And people had to ask some hard questions to get to the 26%. And that's what real leadership is about. That's what Senator Tim Scott is saying. Look, we don't have to run from our history. We don't have to be ashamed to say, you know what, we want to support HBCUs in 2022 or going forward, because, Brown University, beautiful school, Ivy League, but not every Black American is going to want to go to Brown University, because we are diamonds in a rough. So they might not take a C student. But I know a lot of HBCUs that take a C student. Sometimes they take a D student, and guess what? That D student becomes that A student, because you need that extra little special love and help because of the different things that we experience and uniqueness of different types of trauma that we bring to the table. That uniqueness is what HBCUs, do. They turn that diamond in the rough and say, oh boy, and you get out there and you get to shine and you get to become into your being. And we get to be a part of that because that's our history. And we should be able to do all of those things going forward.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm, again, beautifully said, CJ. So I mean, in that regard, do you see this funding gaining bipartisan support or getting caught up in that Washington gridlock?
I see it doing two things. I see it doing both. And that gridlock comes because, unfortunately, sometimes the left might not want Republicans to take credit for things that when we do good. Perfect example, Virginia Assembly, you saw then Governor Glenn Youngkin campaign on our HBCUs. And so Virginia HBCUs are getting fully funded. He's working with former Governor Doug Wilder. But yet our community hadn't really given it full what I call ownership, right? And we're still trying to figure out, well, what do we do? We don't want to give him full credit for that. Okay. And so now that full credit should come forward. We shouldn't argue about things that are important to our community when there should be common ground. There should be no argument about our HBCUs and funding them. It should have been, okay, President Trump, you said you wanted to increase the goal of 5% on contracting opportunity for our HBCUs. Great. You made sure that they had fully funding so that every year they didn't have to come back and beg for their budget, but now they can properly budget like every other institution out here that comes to Capitol Hill and kind of figure out, where do they need to go. That should have been something that was a bipartisan effort within the Congressional Black Caucus. That never should have been a debate about, oh, we can't support that because of President Trump. We don't want to give him credit, or we don't want to work with Senator Tim Scott. Same thing about criminal justice reform. It never should have became a partisan discussion. Mm-hmm. It should have been able to say, okay, we have different thoughts on how to get here, but of that 80% of things that we think we can agree on, let's deal with that first, and then let's figure out how can we come back and deal with that 20% that we don't agree on so that we can move it forward. And I miss the folks like, Andy Young and others, because those were old school politicians. Adam Clayton Powell. It's like, let's get in a room, have a drink, smoke a cigarette, smoke a cigar, and what can we do the business of our people? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now we're doing the business of the party versus the business of our people. And now we're at a sense in things where when we look at voter registration, Black Americans now are becoming more independent and splitting their ticket. And now they are listening to Republicans because they say, wait a minute, this defund the police is off the chain. When you're getting babies killed every day, and we're getting more and more desensitized to it, and we go from far left or far right versus coming in the middle. And they're saying, look, at least Republicans want to keep the police force. Now, does that mean law enforcement has a way to go to rebuild that trust in the community? Absolutely. But do you throw the baby out with the bathwater when there's a problem? And the answer to that is no. Because you do want to be able to go out and have a drink and not worry about, we got to admit that we have gangs in our community. And what are we going to do with modern day gangs? We got to have that, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be afraid to go to an establishment. And now, because gangs are a lot more mobile, they're doing snatch and grabs. And, you want to go out and look nice. You don't want to go out and be like, oh my God, I can't wear my 1-carat diamond studs that my grandma gave me because, somebody might, knock me in the head. Or, my grandmother or my father gave me this nice Volkswagen and I worked very hard to make the insurance payments, and someone sends you an Apple tag and you go home and next thing you know, your car gone. Mm-hmm. These are all of these things of these discussions that we must have, and they must be frank, they must be honest, and it must be in a bipartisan manner. Mm-hmm. And I wish we had those days where we would take the politics out and we can come and sit and have that kind of discussion. And we need to have that kind of discussion.
Right. And I CJ, I think that's a wonderful place to end on, is really getting back to working in a bipartisan manner and having those discussions, and not just having it be all about, party versus party, but really the business of our people. So, with that being said, Jordan, I CJ, so I've absolutely.
That's all right. I like the last name, Jordan.
Okay, we can go by Jordan.
Jordan, yeah. But I'm gonna send Michael. I'm gonna send Michael my royalty check. I'm gonna send me my royalty check.
Perfect. Well, I've absolutely loved this discussion and just the insight you've been able to bring on the show today. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.